This week on A Brief History Conspiracy.
Evidence of the Anunnaki.
Sweet. So our timeline for this episode is 200,000 years ago, roughly, when mankind was kind of created to become slaves by the Anunnaki, which we now know to be true. To around 12,000 years ago, the deluge, which is when we think they buggered off.
Yeah.
So, and this whole evidence now is about the evidence of the Anunnaki. So what we can see that might still be left today. So not just the stories, what is actually left that tells us this is actually true.
Yep.
So, I mean, first of all, we've got to go Sumerian. That's where Sitchin got all this information from.
Yeah, and the clay tablets, the cuneiform tablets that the Sumerians...
First recorded writings
left
ever.
for us, yep.
Really. It's a little bit out of our chronology, because this was about 6,000 years ago, 6,500 years ago.
Yep.
We're going to make the argument in other videos that this is the first writing that we still have now. I don't genuinely believe it was the first language.
No.
Personally.
I believe we've been communicating. We've had our current brain capacity for 250,000 years, same as it is now. So we've probably had similar language and writing skills for that entire period. It's just most of it's probably been lost.
It's been destroyed, isn't it? So, but we'll make that argument in later videos. The other area we're going to talk about now is Micheal Tellinger, who is an interesting guy.
Yeah, very interesting South African. Yeah.
Yes, where you're from.
Indeed.
And the thing I really like about this guy, he considers himself a lone crusader, doesn't he, really?
He does seem a bit like a lone crusader, yeah, very much so.
He knows the truth, we're all fools, and he's out finding this stuff. And he comes out with some really interesting things, but he does go a little off left field for me at times as well.
Yeah, he does.
Let's get into this anyway. So first of all, Adam's calendar. Is that the easiest place to start?
Yeah, probably the best place to start, isn't it?
Because it's supposed to be the start of mankind.
Well, yes.
So Adam's calendar, if you don't know, it's a bit like Stonehenge. It's in South Africa. It is ancient. It was supposed to be built with some dolerite stones, which is again like Stonehenge. They found a site where they really, really wanted to build this thing, and then they went, this stone, nah.
And then ship the stone in from several hundred miles
away.
Move
the stone in from hundreds and hundreds of miles away. I don't know if there's some specific thing about dolerite. Is it magnetic or is it thing? I don't really know anything about it, but
yeah, I mean, I think well, one, it's a very hard stone, isn't it, to work,
which hence it still exists.
Yes. Yep.
I think Tellinger talks about that, doesn't he? He talks about how difficult it would be to actually break this stone or work this stone.
Yep.
And he said even with today's technology, it would be difficult to. And I think he says
even with diamond-tipped blades on power tools, you're still difficult to shape and work the stone. So
because the modern, I should say that the mainstream science, which we're going to go, I love using the mainstream word. Like I say, the mainstream fools believe this site to be about 12,000 years old. We're talking Göbekli Tepe sort of time again. Tellinger argues it's actually probably much, much older. Well, he's arguing basically it's 200,000 years old at least. And he talks about the dolerite being worn and broken, doesn't he, as evidence for that.
Yeah, there's a layer, isn't there, of is it microbial growth over the top of the stones that he uses as evidence that the thickness of that microbial growth and how quickly the thickness, how quickly it actually layers over time. The thickness indicates that it's much older than
he has a point.
The mainstream.
And mainstream science has got a bit of form on underestimating these things. Let's be honest. Göbekli Tepe is the perfect example of that. They said we have no ability to make to have this sort of technology, and then we said Göbekli Tepe turns up and go, ooh, it's at least 12,000 years old.
I think the main problem is that any new archaeological evidence that's found today, the evidence is then fitted into our current timeline that we believe things occurred.
People struggle to sort of
realise
realise
rather than adjusting the timeline.
Yeah.
From the evidence. So we have a preconceived timeline that we're fitting the evidence that we find into. And I think that's where the mainstream is probably going significantly wrong with some of the dating of some of these old sites that, to me, cannot be dated correctly.
So then you've got other places like Jericho City, though, that is another good example of this, that they genuinely believe is the longest lived in city in history, They believed it's been lived in since about 6000 BC. Recent studies have found that this goes much further. It goes back to 9000 BC that people have lived in civilizations.
That's continuous living.
Yeah, archaeological
in
evidence has come recently. You have to wonder how much more archaeology is under the city that we're never going to see, you know?
That
But that,
you can't
again,
get to.
goes back to Göbekli Tepe times. Again, a time when they didn't believe we were still hunter-gatherers, basically. And now we're starting to realise that actually we weren't. You know, at the end of the last ice age, we were building cities, we were building structures that are very complex.
Yep.
I wouldn't have no idea how to build some of the things they're talking about Adam's calendar, and Göbekli Tepe, for example, these T-shaped structures.
Yep.
The local tribes in Africa believe that Adam's calendar is the birthplace of man, and
Yes.
it's actually where Adam and Eve came from. They believe it's the Garden of Eden.
Yep.
You were saying about how tribes from other places have come across.
Yeah, there was some in the Micheal Tellinger stuff. There was some of the shamans of the Native American Indian tribes.
This is the Hopi tribe again.
The Hopi tribe, I think it's linked to, yeah, and some other tribes actually went and visited South Africa, particularly Adam's calendar, as they believe that when man goes through the last age, the fifth age, we will then suffer a massive catastrophe and be reset back to
this is something I
the
know
Stone
the Hopi
Age,
tribe,
basically, again.
Yeah. Sometimes the Hopi tribe believe that we've been through these. We're in the fifth age of man at the moment. There's been 4 disasters which have nearly wiped us out, and we're now in the fifth age, and we're about. Oh no, sorry, we're in the fourth age now, and we're about to go into the fifth age.
I think, yeah.
And they're expecting this massive reset. They think the last one was this Younger Dryas event, which we're going to talk about in a few weeks. And that was the beginning of the fourth age of man. There's actually quite a lot of evidence to show that's probably true. So, like I say, at the Younger Dryas event, we went down to 10,000.
And it all everything seems to ancient civilization. When you research into it, everything seems to link back to the Younger Dryas event and back to about this time period of about 10 to 12,000 years ago.
This possible reset of civilization, isn't it?
Which means that the climate change that occurred was very significant at that point.
I think there's a big point as well to say that these big cities arrive, and it's a change of environment. Our environment today, where the Middle East is sandy and quite arid, isn't what it was like at the end of the Younger Dryas event. It was green and lush and lovely. North Africa was green and lush and thing.
Yeah.
Because the cold had come from the north, and Britain was not a nice place to live, but that sort of temperate zone moved south. So that's where we flourished. Yeah. And as the Younger Dryas ended and the Ice Age ended, the temperate zone moved northward. Europe became the easier place to live. The more resources you have, the easier it is to live. The more you can spend time on other things like building castles and things.
Yep.
I think you can see this where civilizations flourish. Anyways, is environmentally linked.
Oh, of course, yeah, definitely so.
And where we're talking about here is where it was environmentally flourishing was North Africa. So you can understand that there would have been stuff going on there.
You can also, I suppose, understand as well with the advance of the desertification of the Sahara and of the Middle East. You start to see people move away. So there's a lot of migration into southern Africa from northern Africa. Yeah. As the deserts were forming, which I suppose nicely links into the Dogon tribe, which are a tribe that supposedly were originally from North Africa that migrated southwards as the Sahara got bigger, and in their mythology they speak of their of their gods that created them as having come from the star system Sirius.
Okay, which is again possibly what we're talking about.
Their mythology also speaks of it being a tertiary star system,
which we didn't know about.
Which we didn't know about until the late 80s. Yeah. But their mythology goes back thousands of years and describes
it's
a
very
tertiary
similar
star
to the
system.
tribe, isn't it? We've got to do a thing on them. Because there's so many of these tribes that you think. I think we talked about this in our introduction episode. That there's a lot of these tribes about there that once you strip away the mythology, you get this information like that, like this serious thing.
There's some basic underlying science.
But it's science that we didn't even realise 50 years ago.
No.
But then we now we look back and go, oh, that's bloody irritatingly accurate.
Yeah. Too accurate to be a guess.
If we go back to the Adam's calendar, though, just quickly, because we have wandered off there a little bit, as we tend to do. Yeah, fuck it, Sasha.
Yep.
So one of the things that Tellinger talks about in this is these 3 pyramids, and when he marks them on a map, he does that golden spiral we talked about in our Mars episode.
Yes.
Which between the face on Mars and
the face in Sidonia and the pyramids in that region.
There's this similar golden spiral connecting them. Unfortunately, the evidence for the pyramids seems quite limited. He's got a selfie of himself at Adam's calendar, and in the background, there's an arrow going. These are they just look like 3 hills to me. But maybe we can do some research on that. I've tried to find other research on that.
Maybe with some excavation.
Talking about it, but there's no real evidence. I'd like to see even somebody just walk up to them and go and have a look, but they don't even seem to have done that. But it is interesting that they geographically seem to line up to the Adam's calendar, and Adam's calendar itself seems to line up with the pyramids in Giza. They seem to be along the same longitude.
Yes.
Which is again interesting, and again something we're going to talk about in later episodes about when we sort of got to talk about Atlantis and these sorts of things, that there seems to be objects and constructions related to each other all over the world that
the ley lines and such. Yes.
Along longitude and latitude, which these people shouldn't have known anything about. So
no.
Interesting. So actually in the Bible again, which talks about Adam and Eve, and one of the things God told Adam, one of the things he would find at the Garden of Eden was gold and resources, and it would be, it's this utopia to live. It just seemed like an odd thing for God to mention. Oh, by the way, mate, some gold there. It just seems like, why was God telling Adam about gold?
Yeah, all powerful, all wise, all knowing, just can't handle money or gold.
Yeah, well, he seems to want gold. You want that gold, you want to dig that up and hang it around your neck, and then when I turn up for it, give it me. Because maybe God wasn't God. Maybe God was the Anunnaki. Because the Annunaki seem to be interested in gold, and obviously these places we're talking about are still today where we dig up most of our gold.
Yeah, most of the gold mines are in South Africa. Yeah.
So the other thing is the Great Zimbabwe, which is some ruins in Zimbabwe, weirdly.
Yeah. Well, Zimbabwe being next to South Africa, it kind of makes sense that they're. What was it? There's basically there's some kind of ancient ruins that are supposedly called Earth Station 1, which was supposedly the Anunnaki's first base,
which we discussed in our first video in this series, and I make the link between that and Thunderbirds.
You did.
Randomly, that's how my brain works. I'm not overly impressed by the Great Zimbabwe ruins. Mainstream science says again, that these ruins are only about 2,000 years old. They're not massive. They're not huge ruins. They look quite modern when you look at them. They look like medieval.
Yeah, and they haven't got the megalithic blocks that some of the other sites have got around the world that indicate an advanced cutting and positioning technique for the blocks.
You could say that's because it's the first city, but I'm not convinced by the Great Zimbabwe. It's an old ruin. It's still interesting.
Yeah.
The big thing he talks about though is these cattle kraals.
Yes.
And these things are interesting.
Very.
So they've been back from 1891. Somebody called Theodore Bent sort of found these things, and basically, again, mainstream science says they're
cattle corrals for holding penning cattle. I assume
holding the cattle for you. It's fair enough. It's impressive that they were doing this in Africa a couple of thousand years ago.
Oh yeah.
Because again, mainstream science says these are only a few thousand years old. Tellinger says that they're at least 50,000 years old.
Yep.
Roger Summers in the late 80s said that he thinks there's actually more like 20,000 of these things, whereas Theodore Bent said there was only about 4,000. Micheal Tellinger himself estimates there are 10 to 20 million of these things. But he doesn't really give a great deal of evidence on how he got to that number. It seems to be a guess.
Although from looking at Google Maps of South Africa, I can confirm that there are a lot of these cattle kraals littered across the South African countryside, if you could call it countryside.
10 to 20 million, though. Okay, if we believe that they are for cattle,
yep.
If there's 10 million of these things,
yep.
Right? Say you only hold 100 cattle in each one.
Yep.
That's 1 billion.
Yeah, it's 1 billion cattle.
Right. But say you're not only using them all. So say even if it's only 500 million, that's still a third of all the cattle we have today.
Yes.
We only have about 1.4 billion cattle today.
And a third of those were all centralised in South Africa.
Where the population of the planet was only 10 or 20,000.
The sheer number of these cattle kraals,
it's insane.
Would indicate that there was a much larger population there, or they weren't used for penning cattle.
So yeah, the other thing that Tellinger does point out as well, that these things don't have any ways in and out for the cattle.
Yeah, no openings.
Which I don't know about you, but they're not big jumpers as far as I'm aware.
No.
Cattle. These things are built from stone and they are reasonably high. And even if you did, if the cow can just step over them or jump over them, they're not very good at keeping cattle in.
It's not much of a cattle pen, is it?
No.
No.
So I don't. The mainstream science, I believe, this one might be wrong.
I've got a feeling they're wrong. I've got a feeling they've put together their best theory from the evidence available. But
because in other areas you would see things like this, these cattle pens and things, but we tend to put gates on them. Even back in the day, there'd be an opening where there'd be a chunk of wood across. It wouldn't necessarily be a nicely made gate, but you built them to keep the cattle in. There's no point having one. And all these kraals as well. There is significant evidence of roads between them all.
Yes,
so they were used. They were walked. These were important.
Yes.
For cattle, I don't know. The other thing is they're built out of this weird resonating stone as well. That Tellinger at one point does this thing and he lifts it and he dong, and it makes a very pretty sound. I've tried to look into that. I don't know why they're using that stone.
Well, it's. I mean, I like the theory behind the resonating frequency of, So there's a theory, isn't there, as to how the pyramids were potentially built, and Coral Castle, where that guy on his own managed to construct a building or a structure out of megalithic blocks, and he claimed to use acoustic or sound in order to lift these massive stones, which would tie into the resonating frequency of something.
Tellinger talks about these ice cream cone shaped cones that he finds everywhere. He says everywhere he goes he finds them, and there was an eyewitness that suggested this. The chap at the Coral Castle was seen by children with ice cream cone shaped rocks picking up the other stones.
Yes.
Now my scientific brain can't. This is where we're going a bit left field for me. I can't see how that would. I just can't see how it would work.
Focusing sound waves.
Yeah, but how do you focus sound wave through stone? What are you wiring up to? What's the?
You're somehow focusing the sound wave at a sound wave that happens to be at the resonating frequency of the object that you're lifting.
Yeah.
Which
now that's important. Now, if we go back to the resonating frequency thing, that is important. Yes. And I do understand the science of that.
Yeah.
That you can use sound, particularly to break objects.
Yeah, you can.
And
break
you don't need power.
Sound.
It's not like you scream at something you can break it. You can actually use normal sound, but if you get it to the right frequency, everything vibrates. And if you can get a sound wave to use the right frequency that it's vibrating at, you can affect it.
So the easiest way to look at sound is to look at water, because sound travels as a wave. So the reason that you're using the resonating frequency is to get the interference pattern of two different waves. So the amplitude builds, it doubles, rather than the interference of two waves like cancelling each other out and being a null. You want it. You want the interference of the two wave patterns
to increase the wave rather than to nullify each other.
Yeah, okay. to the amplitude doubles, and that's how you can break glass.
And this is why you don't need a significant energy if you're using the right frequency. And this is why you could potentially move things. Now, the one thing I did generally go was when we were at Stonehenge.
Yes.
When we were at Stonehenge, which if you go back to our previous video, I'll put the thing on. They were flashing up images of things that had been found over the thousands of years since Stonehenge, and one of them was or multiple ice cream cone shaped stones.
Yeah,
with patterns engraved on them, and that did make me sort of go, "Oh shit!" That Tellinger thing I watched.
And how much of a similarity it is with Tellinger and the cattle
We have
crowds.
no idea how we're going to do Stonehenge. We've got no idea how Stonehenge was built, but shit, that was like a Jesus moment for me.
Also seeing the 20-ton stone block that lays horizontally across the vertical blocks, and then going, how did they lift that there? Even if they brought
Which
all
is
those
the same
stones
as this
in
Coral Castle,
without
massive cranes. I don't know how he did it. So it's weird. The other thing he says about these corals though is that they have odd properties, and he says it's maybe because of these resonating stones. Again, I would want to see somebody else go and do this, because I haven't even seen videos of him doing it. But he says that when you walk into these corrals, GPS stops working.
Yes, he does say that,
which makes no sense. It's somehow blocking the signal. So it's ionising the air somehow and blocking the GPS. It also says that the heat rises. As you walk in, they can go up anything by about 7 or 8 degrees centigrade. So
significant thermal fluctuations as well.
Yeah, as you walk into them. And again, I've not seen any evidence to actually back that up, but that's what he says. He then went very left field for me though, and said that, and he points to one specific corral, quite a large one. He said, "Well, this is the one that destroyed Atlantis."
I think that's a bit of a assumption.
I'm going to go stretch.
More than a stretch, because if Atlantis was destroyed by some kind of energy wave created from a cattle crown in South Africa, and there's 10 to 20 million of them, how did you pick the right one, mate?
Yeah. But also, how does the energy go up and then come back down again to Atlantis? I don't understand that either. How are you aiming the damn thing? Because this is the two things. He makes two quite big examples for this, and he makes out that like this is proof. The one, when he's talking about the ice cream cone things, he shows a doctor, a scientist, who was able to create a thing through vibration to boil water.
Yes.
And then he's saying when this guy died, he didn't pass on the technology. Loads of people have been trying to copy it. That's not massively interesting to me. You can do things. We all know that if you hold something that's vibrating really hard, it can burn you. So I don't think if something's at the right frequency that you were talking about, you can boil water with vibration. And it wasn't done through any magical stone or something. This bloke, it had been plugged in. It was a device that was plugged in. You put it in the water and it boils the water. The interesting thing was it boiled it almost instantly.
Yes.
But great. I don't see how that's connected to these resonating stones at all in my head. It's a totally different type of technology. It's interesting, not related to this. Again, talking about this death ray thing, he talked about there was a cross section of a Japanese microwave weapon that they were trying to design at the end of World War II.
Yes,
and it's got a similar sort of cross section. It reminded me of there was an Ancient Aliens video, and it went, if you take a picture of the ancient Mayan calendar as a cross section, it looks an awful lot like a cross section of the Large Hadron Collider. Coincidence? No, not even fucking remotely related. There's genuinely fucking go and Google that. I'm not joking. It's got
that is extremely
they're not
far-fetched.
Connected, even remotely related. And that's a similar thing to this. Yes, all right. If you have the cross section of a corral or a picture of a corral and a cross section of this Japanese weapon, it was circles with it. It looks like a flower, but that's not.
Yeah, but
related.
you could take cross sections of a lot of things in the physical world, and so they look like a cross section of something else.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're taking cross sections of objects that are roughly the same geometric shape, then of course it will look like the other geometric shape that you make.
Yeah, but if you look for stuff, if you're looking for connections, you're going to find something somewhere.
Yeah.
You're supposed to find evidence, not look for a connection. But anyway. Saying that, the kraals, I don't think they were for cattle, and they are interesting.
I don't think they were for cattle. No, I think there's another use.
Far more work done on this to find out what they were actually for.
And I tend to agree with Micheal Tellinger that I tend to believe that they're probably more likely far older than we expect, because the history of South Africa, we're told that there's so few people there for so long in the past, and that until about 400 years ago there wasn't more than several thousand people in southern Africa.
I'm just surprised that all the archaeologists didn't do what they always do and go, it's a church. That's what they always said. It's a religious praying site. It's a series of small walls.
I suppose we probably wouldn't have bought that. What, they built a temple? What, there? Oh, there, yeah, and another 10 to 20 million, or within.
If Tellinger's right on that one, I don't believe the 10 to 20 million, but. Yeah.
Well, yes, okay. We haven't checked into the 10 to 20 million.
No, but I don't think he has either.
I somewhat expect that the number of them is closer to 10 to 20 million than it is to the two previous estimates of 4 or 20,000, though. Because if he's been roaming about South Africa...
Theodore Bent was riding around on a horse, and he estimated 4,000. But he was literally riding on a horse. We could do satellite. With satellite, I think Tellinger is basically argued he's using satellite imagery to find them. And then when he's done... I imagine what he's done is taken a small area, counted them, and then times that by the area of Africa.
Yes.
And then got this number.
Or maybe taken several small areas and then averaged 5 small areas and then used that to project across the entire South African terrain. But, and it can still lead to some massive margins of error if you happen to pick your sample sites as the heaviest amount of cattle kraals in that location, then your estimate for the whole of South Africa can be skewed massively by factors
definitely.
of
and it could just
10.
be I think so maybe not. Right, gold. That's our next bit. That's my thinking. Gold number. Sorry.
An unfortunate schmelting accident.
I know Trump hasn't moved to this thing we'll have to do a thing on Trump. Trump really likes gold as well. Coincidence? I'm just saying, Trump might be an evil Anunnaki related Mason.
The scary thing is what information Trump's probably now been privy to as the president.
God, he's but
he's been briefed on. Something is coming out on Twitter or in a 1 a.m. press release that he gives, or something's going to come out.
We're going to find out they're aliens on Twitter because of him. Anyway,
it might be good though. Can you imagine Trump just coming out and going, "Oh, by the way, aliens, I've been briefed. It's all real."
Yeah, that's probably how it's going to happen. Gold mining, though.
Yes.
So we know the Anunnaki came here. They wanted gold mining. One of the things Tellinger talks about is that he has been privy to rules about when they're gold mining, if they accidentally come across one of these ancient vertical
ancient mine
shafts, that the Americans have basically told them they're to shut it down and not to excavate, not to touch it. And he says he's been privy to somebody told him that this is true, and that these mines are all over the place.
Yeah, and there's a lot of these ancient shafts that the mining companies in South Africa come across, like Anglo-American, for example. So with this information from Micheal Tellinger's videos or documentaries, I thought it wise to ask my father, who worked on the gold mine for Anglo-American in South Africa. Yeah, managed one of the gold mines in South Africa. And he was completely unaware of any ancient shafts being found, and had never heard of it in his time there, which was...
How long did it take him to stop laughing at you?
Probably a few minutes. But in all seriousness, he was there for 8 years in the 80s. So for most of the 80s, he was there managing one of the.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true.
No, but he just wasn't privy to that information.
We have almost like an insider on this one, and it doesn't seem to be true. So I don't know. But again, I kind of Googled this and I was looking for images and I found a bunch that were just CGI. And this is the thing with this now, that when people genuinely believe these things and they genuinely have evidence and they then have a computer, you're asking for trouble. They just believe it so much they have to have the evidence, and they don't care if they fake it, or they do it just to get hits on YouTube.
Well, yes, there's a lot of that now, I suppose, in just terms of getting viewing numbers. People don't care whether they're.
But I did find some stories. I did find some stories that did seem to back it up and seem to be interesting. So so maybe.
Well, I'm not discounting it completely, because if you need to keep a secret, the one way that we know that that's done is compartmentalisation of information from the Americans from World War II, from creating the hydrogen bomb. What was it, 250,000 people were working on, on the hydrogen bomb,
what it was,
but only 12 at the top of the pyramidal structure actually knew what the rest of the 249,988 people were doing.
Compartmentalisation of things is really good. That's how they fake the moon landings. So it's another video. Well, mate, that's it really with the evidence on that. What do you think? Do you think there is physical evidence to prove that the Anunnaki were here, or is it just
the physical evidence is a bit limited, isn't it? There's more circumstantial evidence that ties in with the story of our creation as the slave race, created by the Anunnaki, and then the fact that supposedly Adam's calendar is the birthplace of man.
Circumstantial stuff,
and they built us supposedly the Adamu to
and that's
gold.
what the local people believe. They do believe it's called Adam's calendar for a reason. So yeah.
So I believe
I don't know.
I believe that there's something more to it than we yet.
We're going to go into Atlantis shortly. Yep. I would actually believe this is more to do with some sort of ancient civilization pre Younger Dryas.
Yes.
And evidence of that than evidence of the Anunnaki. For me, that's where I am lying.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's very hard to provide evidence for a superior race that created us when you don't. The only thing that we've got is these cattle crows. We don't understand what they're used for. We suspect the mainstream hasn't got it right, and they probably weren't cattle crows. But we still don't know what they were built for, or who they were built by, or when they were built, so there's far too much that's still left open to investigate. I think, to really say conclusively there's any evidence.
I would say I think Tellinger has found some interesting things.
Yes. And
he's found some things that really do deserve more research.
Yes.
I then think he's made connections and leaps that I think are a little bit further than I would go.
Yeah, I think some of the connections he's made are further than I would go as well. What I do like about him, though, is he's out there in his own country trying to find evidence, doing it, trying to find physical hard evidence in and around his home, basically.
And this guy, he's not a stupid guy, and I genuinely think he believes what he's doing. I genuinely think there's lots of other projects he's involved in as well that are really interesting. It's
that Ubuntu
project where he's that's another episode again, but it's to do with banking and the point that
taking on the banks.
Money's only has any value because we agree it does, and that actually, so in that case, does debt have any value? And it goes on and on. But
it's going deep into contract law, basically, and the fact that they didn't have basically, in order for a contract to be valid, both parties have to have what they put up into the contract. So if the bank's lending you 250,000, but it only has 25 grand on its balance sheet, and the other 225 is created digitally out of thin air, did it have the capital to lend you 250,000 pounds in the first place?
So it's breached the contract before it's even started.
Yeah, it's void ab initio. So we
don't have to pay our mortgages back, people. Just stop paying it immediately.
Yeah. This would be great. The world will collapse if he succeeds. But
my mortgage is really expensive.
So collapse of civilization.
Fuck the world.
Bring it on.
My credit card bill needs to be stopped paid. But so he's a very bright guy, and you never know. Maybe he's fucking right.
Yeah.
Maybe we're wrong, but I don't think he's quite there yet for me.
No, I like some of the links, the Anunnaki tying in with creating us to mine gold for them, all the gold mines in South Africa, these ancient structures in South Africa, the use of sound potentially to move large stone blocks.
I find that very interesting.
Very interesting. So I think he's on to some interesting hypotheses.
The areas we're going to have to come back to, we're going to come back. The real evidence for the Anunnaki, I think, is the Sumerian text, which we're going to come back to, because it's in we're doing this thing in order. The chronology for that is a bit way down the line, and it gives us the opportunity to come back to it. I think we're going to come back to using sound to move large stones when we do the pyramids, which is again coming up soon, because some of the stones that were being moved were fucking enormous, and again for Stonehenge. So these are all really interesting things. I wonder though whether this is less to do with the Anunnaki and more to do with Atlantis.
Yeah, or more to do with a pre-Younger Dryas human civilization that existed.
Which is what we're going to be doing over the next few episodes. So, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.